Hello, welcome all. People seem to have enjoyed the last time I talked about a movie. However, rather than a propaganda film, this time I will cover the Disney film, Pocahontas, and its inaccuracies. Believe it or not, while this may be news to some, the film Pocahontas is wildly inaccurate. The story of Pocahontas isn't a story of love, but of exploitation and war. As mentioned before, the film about Pocahontas is wildly inaccurate. To the point when I say a film about Pocahontas, what I really mean is a completely different story, with characters that share names with people from history. Usually when Disney creates a film adaptation of a story, it's based on similar events of a fictional adaptation, not an historical one. So even though Disney wasn't trying to create an historical accounting of events, in this scenario, Disney should have been more responsible. While the Disney of today is well known for changing the stories of beloved franchises, at this time it was the Disney Renaissance era, and their films were critically acclaimed to be one of the very best, and so most people gave them a pass for historical inaccuracies. However, my over-analytical brain isn't going to let them skate by. To understand the historical inaccuracies in this film, and there are many, so let's cover the plot of the film. The film opens up with London and the men of the Virginia Company. They get on board the vessel and begin to set sail for the Americas, hoping to find like the Spanish conquistadors did, gold, God, and glory. Captain John Smith is early on shown to be heroic, as he saves a fellow crewmate from going overboard during a hurricane. By the English account, John Smith was a soldier, an explorer, within Europe who was famous across the continent for being a mercenary who won his own military awards and according to him was sold into slavery in the Ottoman Empire, and after 4 years returned to England. However, according to an oral tradition, he wasn't all that heroic. According to the sources of the native tribe of Mattaponi, he held people at gunpoint in order to get supplies from the native chieftains. Despite his reputation in Europe, he arrived at Jamestown a prisoner, and narrowly escaped being hanged, then joined a council of men to run Jamestown. Then we are introduced to the native tribe, with the character of Pocahontas. In reality, she had 3 names. The woman's common name was Amunate, though her private name was Matoka. And Pocahontas was more of a nickname that she was given by her father, meaning playful one. She was 11 years old when she met the English, and the English have no record of her mother. Many have theorized that it was likely her mother had died in childbirth. Back to the film, she is told by her father she is to marry Quoquam, who is a young warrior of the tribe, but she doesn't want to be with him. In reality, in her early teens, she ended up marrying Quoquam, who is described by the English as being a private captain, meaning he would have commanded other men. Though he wasn't a chief, it's entirely possible Pocahontas married Quoquam, not out of duty, but out of love. Women in Powhatan society could choose whom they married, and it was matrilineal. Back to the movie. She has a weird dream and talks to Grandmother Willow. Governor Ratcliffe brings the English soldiers to Jamestown and immediately has them start digging excavations to find gold, which may actually be based on accounts of John Smith telling the men to dig for and wash gold. John Smith goes to explore, comes upon Pocahontas, and somehow they can already communicate. Then they end up falling in love. After a skirmish between the English soldiers and the natives, Powhatan tells the natives to not engage with the English. Both John and Pocahontas get told not to meet one another. Now in reality, when the pair had met, John Smith was welcomed into the Powhatan tribe. He didn't just start exploring and then find her in the woods. And they didn't fall in love either. As mentioned before, Pocahontas was a child at this time, Also, the natives and English didn't have bad relations upon first contact. Instead, natives delivered food and supplies to the English, which Pocahontas was present for. She was a diplomatic symbol of peace due to her being a child and being a daughter of the chief, showing that they meant no harm, which seems to be where the story of her being a diplomat in the movie comes from. In the movie, the pair plan to meet again, but they get caught by Quoquam, an English settler and friend to John, Thomas. Quoquam ends up dying, and Powhatan reprimands his daughter for meeting John Smith, and John Smith is ordered to be executed at dawn. Now, the part about Quoquam dying, the movie actually may have gotten this part right, with the oral tradition saying he died from the hand of Captain Samuel Argall, while the English have no accounts of him dying. In the movie, the two sides go to war. Just as they are about to kill one another, and the chief is about to execute John Smith, Pocahontas stops the execution and convinces the two sides not to fight. But Governor Ratcliffe, still lustful for blood, attacks Powhatan. But John Smith gets in the way. Then the settlers turn on Ratcliffe. John Smith is held back to health by the tribe and has to return to England. Meanwhile, Pocahontas stays behind with the tribe. In reality, John Smith was never going to be executed. According to Smith, he was captured by the chief's brother, and he had met Pocahontas when his head was placed in between two stones, and was put in front of the chief, and a warrior was about to put his club in the air to club him over the head, when Pocahontas put her head onto his head and stopped the supposed execution. It's debated as to whether this was actually an execution, due to John Smith's account of events is disputed, which is because this account of events isn't a first-hand account. It's an account of events quite a bit after the voyage, and after Pocahontas had already died, as the events happened in 1607, and Smith's account of a supposed execution was in 1624. It is likely that this account of events was a ceremony of welcoming John Smith into the tribe. Unfortunately, though, the story of John Smith's account of events went on to start a whole host of myths. What the movie completely left out, however, is Pocahontas' capture and victimization. Captain Samuel Argall, who went on to capture Pocahontas to use her as a bargaining chip, after hearing she was with the Potawatomi tribe, where she went after they had heard she may be captured. Argall would make an agreement with Pocahontas' brother-in-law, Chief Chapaza, who didn't want to capture her, but he feared an attack by Argall, so he agreed. Argall promised Chapaza he would not harm Pocahontas. He also promised she would be released after he got aboard the ship. However, Argall double-crossed Chapaza, and Pocahontas wasn't released. Pocahontas was brought to Jamestown, and her father would release the English prisoners in exchange for her ransom, but she wasn't released. Instead, she learned the English language, Christianity, and the culture of England. She was treated well by all English accounts, though by native accounts, she wasn't. While she was within custody of the English, she has supposedly fallen in love with John Rolfe. That said, she was 15, and he was 27 at the time. According to an oral tradition, she was manipulated by her captors, saying that her father didn't care about her, otherwise he would have come to rescue her. She ended up being baptized as Rebecca, and the two married, though it isn't known where they were wed, nor where they went afterwards. They later had a son, Thomas. While it isn't documented by the English when he was born, the oral tradition claims he was born before they were actually wed. The marriage between Pocahontas and Quoquam was later annulled upon hearing she and Rolfe had married, and her family had allowed the marriage, setting an uncle to represent her, though bear in mind she never actually saw her family again. Pocahontas would go on to meet John Smith again. However, it would be in England. In 1616, the Rolfe family would go to England. Upon the visit to England, Pocahontas would once again meet John Smith, as mentioned before. However, she was so overcome with rage when she met him that she had to leave his presence, and upon meeting him reprimanded him for how he treated her father, in her people and said, "Your countrymen will lie much." When the royal family returned to Virginia, Pocahontas would die at 21 of either pneumonia or dysentery, and would be buried at St. George's Church at Gravesend, England. Overall, the real story of Pocahontas was a tragic tale, and the Disney film about it in 1995 is wildly inaccurate. That said, actual documents about her aren't too common. There is the oral tradition. While it is valuable information, like any source passed down over time, it can change. There are also the accounts by John Smith, in the English, although these accounts may be subjected to biases. Moreover, the accounts by John Smith were written about 17 years after the initial settlement. Disney portrayed a strong and resilient young woman who was reduced to a love interest for John Smith and an object for Western desire. They sanitized the actual history of her exploitation. They also glossed over the realities of colonialism within the Americas, which puts forth a narrative different than the true events. The story of Pocahontas by Disney popularized the myth rather than the real history, and created a problem for historians as well as indigenous communities when trying to teach accurate information. That concludes the real story of Pocahontas and what Disney got wrong. Thank you for watching.